Hello everyone, welcome to another Underrated Film Saturday, and today we are going to be discussing a murder mystery / psychological thriller. Apologies, this video is being uploaded late. I've been relatively busy over this Labor Day weekend, so expect all of the videos that need to be uploaded today. So without further ado, let me discuss what I kind of wanted to address for this Underrated Film Saturday, and as you can see by the title as well as thumbnail, we're going to be discussing Insomnia, which is again, like I said before, the psychological thriller / mystery starring none other than Al Pacino as well as Robin Williams, actually. So this is a very interesting film in a lot of ways, and yes, I'm aware that it had initial success both critically as well as through some box office numbers. But unfortunately, I think it has definitely slipped under the cracks after some time upon its initial release, because I think that's probably largely due to the fact that usually that's what ends up happening to, I think, a lot of psychological thrillers / murder mysteries. They kind of go under the bus. And I think largely that has to do with the fact that they are kind of slow-paced. They're not as in your face as a lot of films are nowadays. And I think that's a big reason why a lot of these films don't get the acclaim later on, like when they're released to DVD and they've been out for a couple of years, compared to when they're initially released, when they do relatively well. So I think you can definitely put it in the underrated category for that reason. And that's why I'm putting it in the underrated category. And I think there's also another variety of reasons that this film probably got overlooked after some time. And I think that has to do with largely the fact that we don't really look at Robin Williams in the way that we look at him within this film, because he's actually a villain. And I'm not going to give away as to exactly how he kind of plays a role as far as the plot is concerned, but usually we don't associate him as an actor with these kinds of roles. So I think that's something else that's very important to note. So when you really look at this film, you don't really think of the actor really playing that kind of a person. And I think the only other time Robin Williams really did attempt at playing a villain was, I think, at an episode of Law and Order, if I'm not mistaken. So he's really limited that capacity of being a kind of crazy, messed up kind of villain, which he is sort of within this film, as you will see. And we also don't really associate Al Pacino with a detective, which is his character. So it is really kind of a film that's a little bit just odd in how it chose its sort of actors and how it kind of brings out the whole setup, which is rather kind of unique in a way. So I think that's also something that might have been off-putting to some viewers. But basically, this murder mystery basically involves Al Pacino's character, Will Dormer, and he ends up being a detective investigating into a teenage girl's murder. And this is within a sort of small, back-of-the-woods Alaskan town. Also, the way in which Robin Williams' character kind of comes into the whole thing, and I'm really not giving away to the fact that he is the villain, because it is kind of obvious that he is the evil guy here. The way they sort of have it all sort of play out is, I think, really interesting, and again, is largely based within psychology, so that's why they call it a psychological thriller. And I also tie in murder mystery because we don't know initially if Robin Williams' character is involved, but clearly after some time we see that he is, and we see into what capacity he's involved. So really, that's what you kind of have to sort of understand, at least, I think, going into this film. And it really plays out as a lot of these kinds of films do. They're not as fast-paced. They're relatively slow. You have to be sort of in that right mood. You have to be really willing to engage into what's going on. This is definitely not a shut your brain off kind of film. So that might have been something that could have been off-putting to some people as well, because usually they like things kind of just handed to them as opposed to, actually having to think as to exactly how certain people are involved and all of that. But despite um, its sort of standard approach as far as to the tone and everything, and the pacing, it's a really interesting film, and you really do get into these certain kinds of things that you would expect from a film like this, but it's actually really engaging and provocative in that way. And I think it ultimately works as this kind of a film. And I understand, though, too, if this is not the style for everybody. I mean, and that's why I can see, too, why this film didn't really retain its, I think, significance over the years, is because largely these kinds of films are rather niche, especially nowadays, because a lot of the times when it comes to these sorts of thrillers, we sort of expect it to be quick and kind of ultimately build a lot faster than kind of taking its time to reveal things. And this is the kind of film that does that. It just slowly builds upon itself rather than taking a big leap and then taking another big leap. It's just kind of gradual. And that might be something that, again, I think was sort of what made this film not as probably well recognized later on, was the fact that it does follow similar patterns that might not appeal to, I think, a large part of today's audience that goes and sees films. But despite that, I think there is a lot of value that can be attributed to this film. I think that the performances are really well executed. You really do get a feel of the environment that they're in, Alaska, and you do feel like that this is a very kind of isolating area in a sense, and that kind of probably plays a little bit into the psychology of the whole thing, which is, I think, something that the viewers who do in particular like these kinds of films will really enjoy out of it. But again, I understand that this is obviously not a film for everybody, but I think it definitely deserves to be looked into if you've not really delved into this kind of a film, because it is interesting in its approach, and I think it is definitely one of Robin Williams' films that has been really severely overlooked over the years. We usually don't think of Robin Williams when you think of this film. Some people might think of, again, another film that I discussed that I felt was a little bit underrated, the Dead Poets Society film. But when it comes to being a crazy murderer, usually you don't think Robin Williams to play that all that much. But it's a very interesting approach in its execution, even though it maintains, again, the same level of tone and such. Because, again, you really do get the sense of the sort of isolating, as well as the very kind of also sort of, again, just a nature-filled surroundings that these people within this sort of town inhabit. So it's interesting because it's not what you expect from a lot of these kinds of murder mysteries, where a lot of it happens really in a big city, and there's a lot of bustle, and there's not a it makes it more difficult for people to sort of solve the mystery. So again, it tosses some things at you. It offers an interesting way of engaging its audience and entertaining the audience by making the audience sort of think about these things. But again, it's not a film for everybody, but I found myself rather enjoyed and engrossed by it. And I think if you just take it for what it is, you can find definitely some enjoyment out of it. But again, it all depends if you like these kinds of style murder mystery sort of films, and if you can accept the fact that some the times these sorts of films follow a more slower paced, a more old school approach to murder and such. Even though this one does try to kind of make it feel a little bit more updated. Yeah, I think that's ultimately all I can say when it comes to this particular film. However, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.